What if the very things you're holding on to so tightly are the exact things pulling you under? Think about that for a moment. We spend so much of our lives gripping relationships, gripping outcomes, gripping versions of ourselves we've long outgrown, convinced that if we just hold on hard enough, everything will stay safe. Everything will stay ours. But Michael Singer, in Chapter 8 of The Untethered Soul, delivers one of the most quietly radical ideas in the entire book. He calls this chapter, Let Go Now or Fall, and that title alone should give you pause. Because he's not suggesting that letting go is some spiritual bonus feature for the especially enlightened. He's saying it's a choice you are always making. Either you release consciously, with awareness and willingness, or life eventually rips it from your hands anyway. And one of those paths leads to peace. The other leads to suffering. So in this chapter, Singer walks us through exactly why we cling, what that clinging actually costs us, and how the simple, not easy, but simple act of releasing each moment as it passes is the doorway to genuine inner freedom. Let's get into it. Singer opens with something that sounds almost too obvious to say out loud. The universe is in constant motion. Everything changes. Seasons shift, people grow and drift, circumstances rise and dissolve. Nothing in the physical world holds still, not for a single moment. And yet, what do we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to do? We try to freeze it. We try to hold moments in place. We fall in love with a version of someone and resist when they evolve. We land on a comfortable routine and panic when it's disrupted. We reach a point in life that feels good and quietly, desperately, try to make it permanent. Singer's point is that this resistance to change isn't just emotionally exhausting. It's a direct conflict with the fundamental nature of reality. When you resist what is naturally moving and flowing, you create friction inside yourself. That friction shows up as anxiety, as tension, as that low-grade hum of unease that so many people live with and never quite name. The universe isn't doing something wrong when things change. It's doing exactly what it always does. The problem, Singer says, isn't out there. The problem is our inner posture toward what's out there. And the teaching here is humbling. The moment you truly accept that impermanence isn't a flaw in reality, but its most fundamental feature, something begins to soften inside you. The grip loosens just a little, and that loosening is the beginning of everything. So if clinging causes so much suffering, why do we keep doing it? Singer goes deep on this, and his answer is both honest and compassionate. We cling because we're afraid. We're afraid that if we let go, we'll lose something essential. We're afraid that the person, the feeling, the identity, the sense of security once released won't come back. And underneath all of that is an even deeper fear. The fear that without these things, we won't be okay. That without them, we are somehow less than whole. Singer points out that this is the illusion at the heart of attachment. We operate as though we can actually possess things, as though a relationship belongs to us, as though a moment in time can be owned, as though our carefully constructed sense of self is something we can protect indefinitely. But ownership is a story we tell ourselves. Nothing is truly, permanently ours. And when we build our sense of security on things that are by their very nature temporary, we are setting ourselves up for a fall. The clinging itself becomes the source of the suffering we were trying to avoid. This is subtle but important. It's not the loss of the thing that hurts most. It's the resistance to the loss. It's the internal war between what is and what we desperately want to be. Singer invites us to look at this honestly, without judgment, and simply ask, what am I actually afraid of here? Because that question, held with sincerity, begins to loosen the illusion. One of the most vivid ideas in this chapter is what Singer says happens energetically when we hold on. He describes it in terms of the inner energy system, the heart, the spirit, the seat of consciousness inside you. When you cling to an experience, a relationship, or an outcome, you essentially store that clinging in your body and your psyche. It doesn't just stay as a thought. It becomes a tension, a contraction, a block in the natural flow of your inner energy. And over time, these stored tensions accumulate. You're not just carrying this one thing you're attached to. You're carrying decades of things you refuse to release. Old grudges, old wounds, old versions of yourself you couldn't let go of, old expectations of how life was supposed to go. Singer says this accumulated weight is exactly what prevents spiritual growth. You can't open to deeper experience when you're packed full of unresolved holding. Think of it like trying to pour water into a jar that's already full. There's simply no room. The practice of letting go isn't about becoming cold or detached or indifferent to life. It's about keeping the inner channel clear so that life can actually move through you, so that you can be fully present for what's happening now, not half present while the other half of you is still back there gripping something that has already passed. The cost of clinging isn't just emotional, it's the cost of your presence. And presence is everything. So what does Singer actually recommend? What does it look like in practice to let go now rather than fall later? He describes it as a moment-to-moment discipline of conscious releasing. Not a dramatic one-time surrender, but a quiet, ongoing choice to notice when you're holding on, and then gently, deliberately let the moment pass through you rather than clutching it. This can be as simple as finishing a beautiful conversation with a friend, and, instead of wishing it hadn't ended, just allowing yourself to feel gratitude for it and release it fully. Or noticing when something goes differently than you hoped, and rather than mentally replaying and resisting, choosing to acknowledge what happened and move forward without the residue. Singer is clear that this isn't denial. You're not pretending things don't matter. You're allowing yourself to feel fully and then releasing rather than building a fortress around the feeling. He describes it almost like breathing. You breathe in, you experience, and then you breathe out, you release. Holding the breath indefinitely doesn't preserve the oxygen, it just makes you suffocate. What makes this practice so powerful is its cumulative effect. Each moment you release consciously is a moment that doesn't get added to the weight you're carrying. Over time, the inner space that opens up is remarkable. You become lighter, more available, more genuinely alive to what's actually happening, because you're not spending your energy managing and protecting a museum of everything you refuse to let go. Singer closes this chapter with something that can genuinely shift how you see your entire life. He says that true liberation, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances going your way, comes from surrendering the need to hold on, not surrendering in defeat, but surrendering as an act of trust. Trust that you don't have to control every outcome to be okay. Trust that life, flowing as it naturally does, is not your enemy. Trust that the open hand receives far more than the clenched fist ever could. When you let go now, or fall becomes more than a chapter title. When it becomes a lived understanding, something profound shifts. You stop fighting reality. And when you stop fighting reality, you are no longer at war with your own life. Singer is pointing at something here that is deeply spiritual but also entirely practical. Because the energy you were using to hold on, all of that vigilance, all of that mental negotiation, all of that low-level anxiety, suddenly becomes available to you, available for presence, for joy, for genuine connection, for the kind of peace that doesn't evaporate the moment something goes wrong. Letting go is not loss. It never was. It is the doorway through which real life, unobstructed, unfiltered, deeply alive, finally gets to come in. Thank you so much for spending time with this chapter today. It genuinely means a lot that you'd give this your attention, and I hope something in it landed for you in a real way. I want to leave you with one question, and I'd love for you to take it seriously in the comments. What is something you've been holding on to? A feeling, a story, an expectation that deep down you already know it's time to release. Not what you think you should say, but what's actually true for you right now. Share it below if you're willing. And if these chapter summaries are resonating with you, consider subscribing. We're working through the untethered soul chapter by chapter, and there is so much more ahead.